All right, hi everybody. Today we're going to be talking about season 2, episode 4 of House of the Dragon, and this is the big battle episode. And with me, I have the wonderful Meera Reeds. Say hi.
Hello, how are you?
Hey Meera, I'm doing fine. We just got off of a chaotic stream, a very interesting stream, and so I'm a little pooped. I'm a little bit tired, but I think I can power through this video.
Yeah, we got this. And it's a
We
very
got
exciting
this.
episode, so I feel like that'll amp us up a little more.
Yeah, that's true. So all right, how this format works is that I have a series of images with me, and these are just going to prompt us. Uh, and speaking of prompts, we have this screenshot of Viserys's crown, and this is when Daemon kills young Rhaenyra, beheads her, at the beginning of this episode. So why don't we talk a little bit about Daemon and where we think he is mentally this episode? Yeah, like what's first off, like when you first saw this scene, like what did you think? Did you question Daemon's loyalty to Rhaenyra? Did you think did you think he was horrified at what he did? What do you think was going through Daemon's head?
Well, so what I think he's doing is dreaming. That he's a man of action and he never really stops. He never slows down. And we dream so that we can process things that have happened throughout the day and we can sort events, and let them rest and let them settle in our brains where they're supposed to go. And so I think what we're seeing is 10 to 20 years worth of unprocessed events because Damon has never slowed down long enough to dream. And so I think it's him processing those past conversations because like twice Rhaenyra said, well, strike me down. I'm what's in your way, uncle. If you want the crown, just strike me down here and have done with all this bother. And I think he's finally got the time now and the drugs.
The Weirwood
uh,
paste
mm-hmm.
to be able to process his stuff. Yeah, that's all really interesting. I the point about processing all of his emotions is really interesting because I get the impression that Damon is someone who just runs away from like everything, like from his relationship with his brother to his relationship to everyone at King's Landing, including Rhaenyra, to like even we see with his own children. He doesn't seem really that interested in talking to them, and I find it interesting now that Daemon is confronted by all of these visions, and he sort of can't run away from them anymore. And I also think that he's a little bit horrified at the fact that he's even like capable of thinking of killing Rhaenyra. Like when he beheads Rhaenyra, the shot we get of him afterwards on his face, he looks like he's just terrified of what he did. Do you think that Daemon will fully like embrace this quote unquote like dark side of him, or do you think we're like gonna get a redemption arc with Daemon? Where do you think the story is headed?
um I think we're gonna get part of a redemption arc, because we know where Damon's story ends, and I won't spoil
Yeah,
it.
we can have a
Um,
spoiler section at the end, by the way. For now, this is like a
yeah,
non-spoiler episode. We can have spoiler talk at the end.
yeah. So what I think is we have been seeing Damon slowly mature. Because I was watching clips from season 1, episode 1 last night for some reason, and
Mhm.
he has become steadier. He has become more deliberate. And as he studies and becomes more deliberate, he is just generally less likely to make these rash decisions because in the vision, in the dream, when he strikes down Rhaenyra, it is a spur of the moment rash thing that is young Daemon, old Daemon. And this is a theme that we is really been highlighted this season, especially this episode, of, teenagers versus adults. Like, teenagers do stupid things and adults do slightly less stupid things, because they have more wisdom and experience and they just go at a slightly slower pace. So Damon loves his family. He loved Viserys probably more than anybody. That they both grew up without their mother. And so I think he has an anxious attachment style. I think he has like an alcoholic personality. Like, not that he drinks alcoholically, but that like he exhibits some of that behavior that is kind of quintessential of alcoholism, like avoidance. And it is only through processing our emotions, being willing to face consequences, being willing to own up to mistakes, that we can start to heal from that. And we have seen Damon start to do that in season 2, episode 3. 3? 2. 2. 3.
Which episode? What scene are you thinking of specifically?
It was episode 2 when he and Rhaenyra talk about blood and cheese.
Oh, yeah.
And he says to her, it was a mistake. And that's the first time we've heard him say that. That previously, when Viserys would call him out for things he had done, or Rhea Royce's cousin called him out at the wedding for killing his wife, he would sidestep. He would crack a joke. He would give an excuse. He would, go off on a tangent. But to Rhaenyra, he doesn't say that he's sorry, but he does say it was a mistake, and that is a step in the right direction toward accountability. So perhaps this is a very roundabout way of saying that I think if Daemon had, 20 years to live and there was no war, and, I'm not, we'll call it 100 years, because we know nobody's going to live another 100 years. But yeah, I think quite possibly we could see Daemon at 60 years old being the best king Westeros has ever seen. So it's really a matter of, between now and the end of the show, how much airtime are they going to give him? But I think he's trending in that direction.
Yeah. I would personally say that Daemon is probably headed for a redemption arc as well. I just find it very interesting that they started him off like at the start of this season, and like at the end of the last season was kind of a low point for him. And I find it interesting that we start at a low point and we're gonna slowly crawl back up from there. Because if you were to have asked me like a year ago, is Daemon going to become a problem or whatever, I would have probably told you that, we might start to see some cracks with Daemon around mid-season of season 2. But yeah, I find it interesting that we start off at a low point this season and we're sort of maybe building up towards the redemption arc. That's really interesting.
Well, so you know what this dream was, right?
Yeah, that
it's the cave from Star Wars Episode 5, when Luke goes in to kill Vader, and then he strikes off Vader's head and the mask pops off and it's Luke's face in Vader's helmet.
Oh, that's really interesting that you bring that up. Yeah.
Yeah, because he goes to talk to Aemond, and then Aemond turns around and it's Daemon's face, and then he strikes down Rhaenyra, and Rhaenyra continues talking. It's Star Wars Episode 5. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's like seeing.
I love it.
Yeah, it's like seeing yourself in your enemies. Which, by the way, yeah, let's talk a little bit about the Aemond Daemon thing, if you don't mind. For me, I find that very interesting because, in a way, I think that Daemon indirectly created Aemon's current sort of persona. And, Aemon's current persona is sort of, he's a human being, he's vulnerable, but because of things like the patriarchy telling men that they can't feel emotions and that emotions make you weak and you should value strength above all. I think Daemon is like the perfect encapsulation of like all of those toxic traits, and I think that Aemond has taken up to that. What do you think?
So some of it, I think it's a lot of different factors. I think surface level, Aemond is looking to Daemon as the male figure of his household who he wants to emulate, because by the time Aemond was old enough to understand what was going on, Viserys was physically crumbling, and so there's that. But then there's also the fact that Daemon and Aemond both occupy the same space within the family. They are both the younger brother of the king.
Yes.
The younger brother of the king, and they are the ones, they both are, it seems to be naturally inclined toward, LARPing Valyria. And that I think the differences that we're seeing, like if we're talking about nature versus nurture, that Aegon II and Aemond are like mirror universe Viserys and Daemon. That we are now seeing what might have happened between Viserys and Daemon if Viserys had been a bully. Because the biggest difference between the two of them is that Daemon was always unflaggingly loyal to Viserys, and Aemond is not that toward Aegon, and it is specifically and only because Aegon bullied him and beat him up. Like, bullying even feels like not strong enough of a word. I mean, like, Aegon took Aemond to be assaulted for his 12th birthday.
It was.
Like, I will. Yeah.
It was abusive, their relationship.
It was abuse. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Continue.
So that's actually something that we're, it comes up in every episode and that we see kind of coming through in different ways, that the people that we grow up to be is so heavily influenced by the way that we were parented. So Alicent being not parented, it sounds like, for a lot of her life, that Otto, held her at arm's length. Her mother was dead, and that she was expected to behave like a tiny adult and like fill her mother's shoes from a young age. And so then she never learned to be warm and cuddly, and she parented Aegon by hitting him. And, now we're seeing how Alicent's parenting style, how that plays out when her kids are adults. And that's not to say, like, I'm not saying Alicent is a bad person because, like, her parents didn't parent her well, but, like, that was it. Family curses. This is something we talk. I'll put a Post-it note on that about family curses. But, I do like that. I like that we are. That was it. We're Aegon and Aemond are behaving now the way that Otto was afraid Daemon would behave, or that Rhaenyra might behave, and I think he deserves that. Mm-hmm. That's what you get for starting a war.
I'm thinking about this specific picture right now, and I'm thinking, because this is Jaehaerys' crown, right? I'm thinking that, and like, you've read the books. We all know that Jaehaerys wasn't necessarily the best father. I can totally see a world where, Jaehaerys passes on the bad parenting teaching styles to his children, and that sort of has trickled all the way down to these younger generations, to Daemon and Viserys, and, Viserys with Aegon. And, like, we're even starting to see Rhaenyra doing a sort of, like, similar thing with Jace this episode, where Rhaenyra seems very dismissive of Jace. And, when Jace says, like, you should send me on a dragon, it's logical for Rhaenyra to say no, but I found it interesting because the way she said it, it felt dismissive for me. She was like, no, she chuckled, and then she cuts him off when he was explaining why he thinks he should. She cuts him off and says, "You're too inexperienced," and that reminded me of episode 2, or one of the earlier episodes of last season, when Viserys would keep cutting off Rhaenyra.
Yes, so there's a very specific purpose for this, and this is why I feel like we need more parents, doing commentary on this. One of the big differences between Team Green and Team Black is that Alicent, as a mother, is very focused on outward appearances. How does our family appear to the rest of Westeros, to the city, to the other nobles? And she says this to Aegon: you can cough about at home as much as you like, but we have to present a united front. Now, Viserys, as a father, and now Rhaenyra with Team Black, is the opposite. Rhaenyra is a mother to Jace first and foremost. And the thing is, Jace addressed her first in the council, not as a lord of her council, but as her teenage son. That you don't speak to the queen that way. And Rhaenyra, rather than responding as the queen, responded as his mom, to a teenager speaking out of turn and being wrong. And so Rhaenys is the one who steps in, and this is why Rhaenys should have been queen, because she's the best at everything. But
which is not incorrect. It's very much true.
Yeah. And so Rhaenys identifies this problem, and she can empathize with Rhaenyra because Rhaenys is also a really good and loving mother. But Rhaenys has had a lot more time and a lot more practice being in the public eye. And so she averts this by saying, I will go, because Rhaenyra and Jace were arguing like family members in the small council in front of Rhaenyra's vassal lords, and you just can't do that. So, I think that's why it sounded dismissive. If Rhaenyra took that tone with another lord, it would be very dismissive. But if you think about it as the mother of a teenage boy who is behaving like an idiot, I think her tone was totally appropriate. Yeah. And I think, and since you pointed it out, I think Viserys did the same with her. That Viserys was sort of shackled by a similar problem, that he did not grow up at Jaehaerys' side. And that he says this to Otto. He says, you were the one who taught me to be king. And Rhaenyra deliberately ignored Otto in season 1, episode 2, when he was trying to counsel her about, political alliances and appearances and all that. And she's like, no, and just walks away. So this is kind of the family curse that she is dealing with, that she has very little experience, like I said, operating in the public eye, and, understanding these, what's it called? When, power distance relationships. That sometimes being seen as powerful is projecting an image of power, and that is, not raising your voice. Like Roose Bolton is really good at this. Like, he never has to raise his voice, and so people have to quiet themselves to listen to him, and then, he gains an upper hand in that interaction. And I find it very endearing that Rhaenyra and Viserys are like this, but in a medieval feudal society, as the monarch, you just can't do that. So I'm sorry if that went way off the rails, but
no. You're fine. We were talking about sort of parenting, in that conversation, and I just shifted the image over to Alicent, which I found very fitting. We were talking a bit about Alicent there, but yeah, I do think it's a really interesting point you bring up, that parenting and ruling a kingdom, those are two very different things. And Damon sort of brings it up in the first episode of this season, that Rhaenyra sort of has two duties. She is a mother, but while the mother grieves, the queen shirks her duties. I feel bad for these people because they have the pressure of, they have to be able to balance those two aspects of their identity of being a parent and being a ruler. I think Rhaenyra has been doing a good job of balancing, of doing that balancing act so far. But after hearing you bring up that, yeah, like Rhaenyra seems like it seems like Rhaenyra was talking to Jace in that scene as if as a mother and not as a ruler. Like, yeah, maybe she's not doing as well as I initially thought, because the scene I went to was in last episode where she sends her children away to the Vale. I feel like that was a very smart decision, both coming in from the viewpoint of her being their mother. She's trying to protect her children, and as a politician, like, she is giving her political ally these two dragons, right? Do you think Rhaenyra? I definitely think Rhaenyra is doing a better job of being both a mother and a queen than someone like Alicent, definitely. But yeah, she does have her flaws, and I am aware.
Well, I think it's sort of a yin and yang thing, and I think we're supposed to see them as foils in this way, that both their styles and affect as queen are opposite, and their parenting styles are opposite. And I think a lot of this has to do with Emma, and we actually see in season 1, episode 1, Alicent hanging back and looking jealous and looking kind of longingly at Rhaenyra sitting by Emma's bath. That Rhaenyra and Emma had an excellent relationship up until Emma died, but at that point Rhaenyra was 14.
Yeah.
She got all the way through childhood and a good way into puberty before losing her mother, that a lot of her identity was kind of set before she lost her mother. And so I think Rhaenyra got more strength than she would have otherwise. Certainly than she would have if her mom had died when she was 6 and Viserys had just... Because what we saw happen with Viserys that Rhaenyra has not done, in season 1, episode 1, after Emma dies, we see Viserys sitting in his room at his model of Valyria, and he's all in white. He's a ghost of himself. He's a ghost of himself without Emma. And at this point, he almost entirely checks out of everything, of being a king and being a father. And he never checks back in, because then we see him with 2-year-old Aegon, and he's giving Aegon wine because Aegon's making noise in the carriage, right? So I think in many ways Rhaenyra is both a better parent and a better ruler than her father was, and I think she is very much emulating her mother, and I think that's part of the reason Rhaenys stepped in the way that she did. That when Rhaenyra went into labor with Visenya, Rhaenys was like, this girl needs a mom. And I'm sure Rhaenys and Emma were fond of each other. They were first cousins as well. The crown. I had meant to touch on that.
Yes.
In season 1, episode 8, we see the crown fall on the floor, and Daemon picks it up for Viserys. That, like, this whole time people have been accusing Daemon of wanting to steal Viserys' crown, but at every opportunity he gives it away.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good point. And like in episode 4 of last season as well, he sort of gave up the crown of the Narrow Sea, which
exactly. Like I cried in that moment that Viserys would not accept help from anybody else. Like, he's going to go sit on the throne because he's the king, but Daemon comes in, and Daemon is like the one person who he can accept help from, and I cried.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think that was an uncommon reaction. I think a lot of people felt emotional during that scene. That was a really good scene.
It's a really good episode. They're all good episodes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and I think what I like is that all of these characters are believable human beings. You know,
Yes.
nobody is a perfect ruler. Nobody is a perfect parent. You know, we see mistakes that Alicent and Rhaenyra make, but they are completely reasonable mistakes for them to be making, given the stressors that they're under, given the way that they were raised, given the values that they have. And so, you know, like, I think the way that Rhaenyra speaks to Jace in that small council scene, I think is the most egregious example we've seen so far. And it was very minor.
Yep, it
you
was.
know, that it was technically public because it was in front of her vassal lords, but it was also a small council meeting. You know, it's not like they had this exchange like at a ball or at a hunt, like like Viserys did in episode 3. When he's like yelling at Rhaenyra in front of the whole court.
Yes.
He reminded me of my dad in that scene. I was like, oh no.
Yeah. Who do you think gets the? I hate to put you on the spot. Who? This is a question that I just thought up of. Who in Westeros do you think gets the best parent award in this time period?
In this time period, Lionel Strong. Well, no, we have Larys.
Wait.
If it was just if it was just Lionel and Harwin, I think they're great.
I was just about to say that Harwin Strong would be one of my candidates, and the reason why is because even though he would probably get his like head chopped off if he were to show a modicum of affection towards Rhaenyra's children, or like if people were to discover that he was the father of Luke, Jace, and Joffrey, like he would get killed. But despite that, he goes out of his way to like show these kids affection and train them, and he's great. He's great, and I love Lionel Harwin. I love Harwin, and he unfortunately we didn't get a lot of time with him, but I feel like he was a great father and definitely someone who deserved better.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and I think Harwin was an exceptional person. That as a man, you know, it is difficult, you know, that these children are his biological children, and he loves them, and he loves Rhaenyra. But like a lot of men get very hung up on their legacy, and now Harwin's not like the Gold Cloaks are not sworn to celibacy.
Yeah.
You know, that like if Rhaenyra hadn't had to marry Laenor, like I mean, hypothetically she could have married Harwin, and it all would have been legal, but obviously that's not the way it went. Yeah. But that a lot of men, like Kristen Cole, for example, would get very scratchy about this, wanting, you know, I want my children to have my name and it's my legacy, and that he is able to remove that ego entirely and let his children have Laenor's name and never kick up a fuss about it and just be totally cool.
Because it's just love there. Love for these children. That's great.
And so this is why I say that I think this makes Harwin a good man.
Okay.
The concern that I have is that as parents, we're always walking a line, right? Like, you know, I try to raise my son with natural consequences and nurturing and emotional availability and empathy. But sometimes we are at the grocery store and he's about to impale himself on something, and I have to be mean mommy for a minute because I don't want him to die.
Yeah.
And all of that other stuff goes out the window. All of that good, empathetic, emotionally intelligent parenting is gone. And I yell at him, and then he doesn't impale himself. And that, I think, is where we saw Harwin slip at the end, because it's not just Harwin's life on the line if it's discovered that they're bastards, it's his children's lives. And this is why I said Lionel, I think, I would say, is the best parent overall, that he clearly raised Harwin, with empathy and with honor, that they
Yeah.
are able to have this very emotionally raw conversation with each other that a lot of sons and fathers don't have. So, like, clearly they have a trusting and loving relationship, but he is also able to check him and say, you are endangering those boys.
That's a good point.
by
Yeah.
by stepping in and acting like their father. You're calling attention to them and you're putting them in danger, and that is not being a good father. So, it's a difficult position for them to be in. Like, there's no, sort of like at the grocery store, there's no good answer. You do your
Yeah.
best in the moment and you try to balance it. And, you know, the only thing you can really do as a parent is try to minimize how much you fuck up your kid, and try not to fuck them up in the way your parents. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm cussing a lot.
No worries. We're past the 5 minute
Okay.
mark.
Yeah. I try not to mess your kids up the way that your parents messed you up. You can mess them up in whole new and creative, unforeseen ways.
That is the takeaway here. Okay.
Yeah.
Do we want to pivot and talk a little bit about Aegon this episode?
Yeah. Speaking of parenting, I feel like it's really, parenting is the theme throughout. Yeah.
Yeah, now that you think about it, this is now that you say that, this episode sort of reminds me of almost like a reversal of Game of Thrones season 4 episode 10 called The Children, which uh it is my favorite Game of Thrones episode. It's the episode where Tyrion kills Tywin, where Arya goes off to Bravos, and it's essentially just the episode where a bunch of the children in the story have to sort of grow up and go on these new adventures. And I find it interesting that in this episode, the children are sort of just like stuck in their childish behaviors and not changing, and that is screwing it all up for the adults. We have Aegon going out to war and ruining, basically, yeah, which is the worst thing that he could have possibly done, making it a whole lot worse for Alicent. And yeah, a bunch of the children just do some really stupid things this episode. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that scene between Aegon and Alicent was fascinating. So, this specific conflict about Rook's Rest between Aegon and Aemond kicks off at the small council meeting. Alicent is absent from the meeting because she is doing a home abortion.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for the first time in her life, Alicent is being selfish. And I support that. I support women being selfish, especially, women who spent most of their life, being child bride abuse victims. I think Alicent should be selfish. But because she was absent from the small council meeting, that situation between Aegon and Aemond was allowed to escalate. And then we see Aegon ask Alicent for advice. And Alicent does the same thing that she did to him in season 1, episode 9. He says, do you love me? And I think she says something like, you idiot. And there is a reading of that is like, oh, you idiot, of course I love you. It's not how she said it. I don't think that's how she meant it.
No.
I think she's saying, like, you idiot, you should be focused on the coronation right now. It doesn't matter if I love you. Which, talk about mind breaking. This guy just lost his father. He's but so he's asking her for advice, and she's rubbing his nose in his mistakes, which I don't think is inappropriate, but
this is probably not the right time.
Right. That he, and again, if anybody needs free parenting advice in the audience, positive reinforcement is always more effective. It is just, it's going to stick better, and it's going to maintain your relationship to your child better. So instead of rubbing his nose in his past mistakes, she could have used that moment to say, Aegon, I'm so glad that you asked me, and praised the thing that he did correctly, right? Because Aegon is extremely receptive to praise.
Yes.
So, and she could have said, and she could have given him a list of things to do, mm-hmm. because he was ready to do them. He came to her for advice. Yeah. I mean, and she said, you're an idiot and a fuck up. The best thing you can do is do nothing. You've already ruined everything.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, he is an adult and he is responsible for his own actions. But on the other hand, we go to mommy for advice because she's the one person who we can still be childlike around. And when mommy treats us like that, what do we have left?
Yeah. It's really interesting that you bring up that Aegon likes praise, because now that I think about it, Aegon could have been, well, I'm guessing here, but I feel like Aegon could have been much different if Alicent just gave him the praise that he needed. And mm-hmm. It just really sucks that, and in a lot of ways, I don't think this is 100% Alicent's fault, right? She was forced to give birth when she was 14, I think. She wasn't prepared to be a mother. And it's not like Westeros has counseling for young mothers or anything. She probably wasn't taught how to be a very effective and good mother. I don't think.
No, not at all. And so this was something I touched on earlier, that Alicent is very much a product of her environment.
Yeah.
That she lost her mother young, and Otto, somewhere in Otto's cold, shriveled heart, he does care about his family, but it's secondary to everything else.
Yeah.
So, she was raised with no mother, and by a father who kept her at arm's length and parentified her, right? So she had no idea how to be a mom, especially a mom to boys. And this is where Viserys should have stepped in, because Viserys did have a father for quite a while, and it sounds like Balon was a good father.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in this society, I think it should have fallen on Viserys in raising Aegon and Aemond. And it's interesting too, because Viserys understood them very well. After the Pink Dread incident, Viserys was like, "Oh, Aegon did it," and Alicent was like, "No, it was Rhaenyra's boys." And Viserys is like, "No, I know my kid. He's a bully. Aegon did it." But So all that to say, this is not me saying that Alicent is a bad person and should have known better. No, I don't. How could she? She is a product of her environment, but we are seeing this family curse perpetuate.
Yeah. And I don't know, I feel like we saw in episode 1, Aegon was trying to almost overcorrect, was what I got from that. What I got specifically from the small council scene in episode 1, where he brought in Jaehaerys and was essentially enabling him to do all of these things and distracting the council. It read to me that he never really got any attention. He felt that he never got any attention or love or validation from his parents, so I felt like he wanted to overcorrect with Jaehaerys and give him all of the love and attention in the world, but to the detriment of more pressing matters like paying attention in the small council meetings. So
yeah. I'm gonna yes and you.
Okay, gotcha.
I agree with the overall analysis. I do think it was absolutely an attempt at correction or overcorrection from Viserys' parenting style. But it can't be overlooked that plenty of people grow up with bad parents and don't become abusive psychopath rapists.
Yes.
And we see in season 1, episode 9, Aegon has left his bastard children at the child fighting pits. Not only that, but he enjoys going to the child fighting pits as a patron.
Yeah.
That he derives enjoyment from watching people who are smaller and weaker than he is hurt each other.
Yeah.
Right? He enjoys manipulating and hurting the people he has power over. So at first, I think it would be appropriate to read the situation of, oh, well, he wants to include his son because his father didn't include him, and he's being a little indulgent because, his parents were so harsh with him. And I think that's fine. The moment we cross over into, no, Aegon is actually kind of evil and psycho, is with Tywin Lannister. And Tom Glencarny is an amazing actor, but you see it in his eyes, and it's the small muscle movements.
Mm-hmm.
He shifts. He shifts into evil Aegon, and orders Tywin to give Jaehaerys a pony ride.
Yeah.
And that is humiliating. He is weaponizing his child to humiliate someone who is lesser than he is in station. The same way that he enjoyed watching the children at the fighting pits hurt each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think this is something Aegon, even with 2 decades of therapy, I don't think this is something Aegon can get past. I think this is a fundamental and core part of his personality. I think with praise and with guidance and with, some gentle handling, you could make him the facsimile of a good king. You could curb the violent tendencies and carrot him along because he obviously doesn't respond well to the stick. At this age, it is not a permanent solution. Where was I going with all this? Oh, and especially that was extra stupid because Tywin Lannister is his only real ally.
Yeah,
from a great house, yeah.
He's probably more than 50 or 60% of his army.
Yeah, and Tywin knows the most about Aegon's naval power because Tywin was the master of ships.
Oh yeah, that's
and
true.
Now he's the one coordinating. I guess there's a Lannister and Tyrell navy or whatever. There's a navy in the West. And now, as the master of coin, Tywin Lannister is in charge of all his money.
Yeah.
So, of all the people in the world to weaponize your child against and humiliate in public, what are you thinking, Aegon?
Yeah. I mean, and I don't know if you've noticed, but Jaehaerys was sitting in Tywin's old seat. So what does that say to Tywin? That he can be replaced by a 5-year-old. That's really humiliating.
Yeah. And with children that age, they can be taught a lot. And I don't mean to turn this into a parenting advice podcast. Any parenting advice is just based on my own experience. I have no expertise, professional expertise in child rearing.
Meera is more qualified than me.
Yeah. Yes. I have a kid, but I'm not a preschool teacher. But even as young as 1, I remember my son would grab things. He'd want to, they're very tactile. They're learning at that age. But if he picked something up that didn't belong to him or that I didn't want him to be holding, and I had actually read this in an article, don't snatch. Because children at that age, they don't know a lot of words, but they will mimic you. And so instead, I would hold out my hand and I would say, that doesn't belong to you. Will you hand it to me, please? And, then I would say, thank you. And I would give him a big hug and say, oh, thank you for giving that to me, because it's Dad's. And so I'm going to go give it to Dad now. And then I would show him, these ones are yours. And of course, anything that's yours, you can pick up and you don't have to ask anybody. But so as young as 12 months old, I was trying to teach him to respect other people's belongings. And so then I never had to worry that he was going to run around with scissors because he could identify those scissors aren't mine.
Mm.
And it's not, it's not necessarily going to work with every kid. Some kids enjoy getting a rise out of people. I was very lucky. My son is very for the most part, very mellow. But that Jaehaerys in this episode is what, 6?
6, 5, something like that.
Something like that. Kindergarten age. He should know better. He should know better. He was being a little brat.
Yes.
If my son behaves that way in public, I would be addressing it immediately. I'd be like, that's not yours. Did you ask? You know, like, and I wouldn't say it like that, but I mean, my kid knew how to behave better than that when he was 2. Because it's, you know, not in a controlling his behavior kind of way, but in a, I taught him to respect other people's space and other people's belongings kind of way. Anyway, I hate Aegon. I hate him so much.
I will say, like, the actor is very good at portraying, like, the different sides to Aegon. He can be funny, he can be pathetic, he can communicate anger very well in the first small council meeting in episode 2. Phenomenal actor.
Oh, yeah. I've actually watched. I was watching a couple interviews, or like chunks of interviews last night. Tom Glencarney's phenomenal. All 4 of them suffer from addiction, some flavor of addiction or alcoholism. Because Aegon is certainly an alcoholic. We were talking about Daemon's alcoholic tendencies earlier.
Yeah. Are you talking about Helena's kids when you say all 4 of them? Or...
Oh, no, sorry. Viserys, Daemon, Aegon, and Aemond. The 2 pairs of the king and the king's younger brother.
Yes.
Because we see Viserys several times drinking to avoid dealing with problems or needing to drink in order to open up emotionally, which is another like alcoholic behavior. Avoidance when he's sober. And then, Aemond, I don't think we see drink. But when he goes to the brothel, we see that he is drinking milk of the poppy now. So he skipped alcohol and went straight to heroin.
Yep. Or opium, I think it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, sorry, I love all these little...
Yeah, no, interesting stuff. Yeah. And I really liked specifically the scene in this episode where he's just sitting in the room and he's looking at the cup, and he just sort of like slowly nudges it towards the edge, and then it falls over. He's a cat. And that made me very upset. That was a very nice looking flagon.
Yeah, but
that was a good...
I did also think of cats.
Yeah. No, but like that was a very smart, I think, visual indicator of him being like him going off the edge, and him finally snapping and doing what he did later this episode. What's the next image that I have? Oh, we have Alice. I mean, we were talking about like before this, we were talking a little bit about Alice and like how her Scottish accent sounded a bit American. I think when I got this image, I wanted to talk about Alice in relation to Daemon, but we talked a little bit about Daemon already. Anything of note to say about Alice Rivers? Like, who do you think she is? Like, what do you think she is? We have all of these like conflicting sources on, is she 400 years old? Was she a, bastard daughter of, Lionel, sorry. Like, what do you think is up with Alice Rivers?
So I think, a couple things. Within the story, she exists outside of the established power structure. So anybody going back and watching this episode again, or these 2 episodes, season 2, 3, and 4, or excuse me, season 2, episodes 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Paying close attention to the body language and manners of address everybody uses with Aegon. Obviously, the most expert and the most accomplished would be Simon Strong. But we get really interesting comparisons of, we see the little Tully not knowing how to address him. I think he says like my grace or something. It's
Yeah.
funny. But Alice is separate and apart from all of that. Alice doesn't address him by any kind of title. Alice doesn't curtsy. Alice looks him in the eye. And it's sort of like Missaria, right? That like when you reach a certain level of power, of another type of power, it's like you can command this from the outside. And that is what ultimately caught Daemon's attention, because like he's very dismissive of most people, but like Rhaenyra and like Missaria, that she will look him in the eye and call him on his bullshit, and she doesn't grovel or anything. He respects that. He likes that. He is attracted to power. Now the other piece that I had about Alice Rivers is I think the whole 400 years old thing is to add to her consequence, you know, in the way that a noble lady would put on a fancy gown. Alice is building up her power and reputation as a witch, so her gown is pretending to be 400 years old.
Sure.
But I think she is, well, and this is just for my headcanon, I have no evidence for this, but I think she is connected to Larys because of what Larys says. Because in the small council, Aegon is like, well, Harrenhal's your castle, like, why aren't you doing something about it? Like, why aren't you upset? And Larys is like, oh, I don't think Daemon's sleeping very well.
Yeah. How does he know that? You know, it's really interesting.
Yeah. Because, you know, they've said, like, no ravens have gone out. Now, you know, obviously somebody could send a raven without telling Daemon, but it is thought in the books that Alice might have been Lionel's bastard daughter, which would then make her Larys's half-sister. And so, you know, if the two of them, because I very much believe that Larys is like some kind of green seer. He's
correct.
You know, we see him with the Weirwood, with the rats, with the limp. He's got all the things, all the trappings of a green seer.
Mm-hmm.
So that he and Alice might be able to communicate in their dreams, or, you know, through the Weirwood net or what have you. And the last point that I'll make as far as Alicent and her power and her, not, oh my goodness, Alice. I'm doing all the names. Rhaenys, Rhaena, Rhaenyra, Alicent, Alice, Alicent. I hate it. Anyway,
Alan, Adam, Alice. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and then there's going to be, you know, Black Alley as well.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So, yeah. She is very knowledgeable. She's not like Bran. You know, we see Bran setting out, kind of blindly wandering through this journey of, like, learning to become a warg. Alice appears to be an expert. You know, she's making weirwood paste. She knows about how the castle was built. She tells Daemon, the bed that you're sleeping in is made of weirwood. So not only does she have control over her power, but she seems to have a good amount of knowledge of how it works on a larger scale, not just as it relates to her, but like how the weirwood interacts with itself.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm very excited for all of this.
Yeah, I'm very glad that our gateway into magic, in House of the Dragon, is Alice Rivers, because like in the books, she's a very mysterious character, and one of the great things about adapting a book like Fire and Blood into a TV series is that we kind of get to see what actually happens. Like we get to see the truth in many ways. And I'm very excited to see what is really up with Alice Rivers. And yeah, the stuff you said about Larys as well, I agree with, because like presumably like they grew up together. And
oh my goodness, they even kind of look alike. I mean, obviously this actress is much prettier, but I'm looking at
yeah, like their facial structure. I can kind of see it, actually. Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
Yeah, like if you told me they were half siblings, I would believe you. Like I would not question.
Yeah. And who knows? Like maybe they learned from each other. Maybe Larys learned from her. Yeah. Good points.
Oh, there we go. Oh, okay. This is like fanfic now.
Okay, all right.
You know,
Let's hear it.
Larys was born a clubfoot, right? And he is, the first time we hear him, he's hanging back with the ladies because the men are all going on the hunt.
Yes.
So when Harwin and Lionel would go out and do man things, Larys would be left behind with his half-sister and maybe even with her mother.
And
that's why...
Sure, yeah. I believe it.
So he learned magic and his brother learned manly things.
I believe it. I'm sold. Yeah.
Yay.
Oh, it's really interesting that Daemon's connected with Alice now. I don't know. What do you reckon is the motivation behind Larys and behind Alice? Because I have a take. All right, do you want to hear my take?
Yeah, I'm curious to hear yours because I'm lukewarm in a few areas.
Okay, gotcha. So I believe that people like Alice and Larys, is that an anagram? Larys? No. There's no R. There's no R in Alice. It's close.
Yeah.
But
R and C look similar, like a lowercase r and a lowercase c.
But yeah, anyways, I think that the both of them are trying to kill all of the dragons in the same way that that people might want to have, like in the real world, like have the nukes disarmed. I feel like Alice and Larys, they see that the dragons are a destructive power and they wish to kill them all, and therefore they're playing this sort of double game where they're kind of like operating on both sides and getting the Targaryens to kill each other. Because Larys, like while he's on the Green Council, he's done some things in the past that have promoted Alicent and Rhaenyra to be distrustful of each other, and Larys has caused a whole domino of things that maybe if he didn't say all the things that he did, maybe the war would not have happened. He tells things, he says things to Alicent in episode 3 of last season that gets is the start of Alicent distrusting Rhaenyra, and he says to Aegon, Otto Hightower was your father's hand, not your hand. And he's just causing all of this chaos that'll lead to a really, really bloody war. And I feel like Alice, I don't know, Alice might try to exploit Daemon and try to make him do things that won't be beneficial towards the Blacks. Because even in this episode, we see that, Daemon has a vision and has a dream and cuts off Rhaenyra's head. I feel like Alice orchestrated that, and Alice liked that Daemon cut off Rhaenyra's head, because that means, we have a third party all of a sudden with Daemon and Caraxes, and maybe Daemon will betray Rhaenyra. So that's my take.
Yeah.
Very rambly, but
yeah. So you pointed something out that I think is maybe a flaw in my theory.
Okay.
So Simon says that he doesn't feel loyal to Larys because he doesn't say he thinks. He says this like he knows it. That
yes,
Larys
correct.
Sent his firebugs to burn Harrenhal and kill his father and brother. Mm-hmm. I'm in two minds about this. That on the one hand, it's possible Alice was in on it.
Okay.
And she also wasn't wild about her father. Or this is going to cause a rift, or has caused a rift between Alice and Larys, and that actually Simon knows this for sure because Alice told him, and that he's using this deduction about the rain as a sort of cover. Because it is logical.
Okay. Yeah.
but like, just because it's rainy somewhere doesn't mean a fire can't start inside.
Mm-hmm.
You know, obviously it's dry where they sleep. So it was actually like it makes sense on surface level, but it doesn't really hold up to scrutiny. So I think these dreams for Daemon are meant to be therapeutic because like twice Rhaenyra has dared him to cut off her head, and now in his dreams he's seeing what happens when he cuts off her head, and he is disgusted by that. And so like the reason we have intrusive thoughts and dreams, it's so our brain can play out these things that we would never do and should never do, but so we can understand them better, and our brains can reconcile them in a safe way. And so I think specifically because Daemon cut off Rhaenyra's head in the dream and he was disgusted by it, I think that's a signal that he will not do that. Or at least, you know, certainly would literally cut off her head.
Yeah.
Sort of like we see like Luke Skywalker tries to save his father then at the end.
Yes.
Instead of just killing him because he had the vision in the cave.
Yeah.
Was it all this? So, so as far as Old Gods magic and dragon magic, now Alice tells Daemon that Heron the Black cut down a weirwood grove to build Harrenhal, like, and that's why it's haunted. The Isle of Faces is right there in God's Eye.
Yes. Oh, it's so cool that we get to see.
So I think it is possible that the wall was built in collaboration between the Children of the Forest and the others to keep dragons in the south, you know, in a place where the weirwoods have mostly been cut down.
Okay.
Because the Isle of Faces, you can't get there most of the time because of like the wind, or like, you know, it'll start raining, a storm will send you back to shore. So the Isle of Faces sort of protects itself, and we know dragons can't fly over the wall. So, you know, as servants, as, you know, priests of the Weirwoods and of the Old Gods, Alice and Larys, I think, I think, you know, quite possibly could be anti-dragon, and maybe that's why they haven't totally severed, you know, whatever connection they may have. You know, that like Alice may be upset about Larys killing Lionel, but they still have this common cause of wanting to take out the dragons to preserve the Weirwoods.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Ooh.
So the rafters of Harrenhal were built with Weirwood, and Alice says that she doesn't think Daemon will sleep well in the bed that's made of Weirwood, which implies that Weirwood is still sentient or connected even after it's been cut and even after it's been shaped into furniture.
Yeah, good point.
When Aegon melted Harrenhal, he burned all those Weirwood rafters again and hurt them.
Ooh, you're implying that the Weirwoods would be angry, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, and it was kind of like a giant, like, blood sacrifice when Aegon burned Harrenhal, because, like, there were tons of people in Harrenhal at that time. And Weirwoods, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Weirwoods, like, drink blood, right? That's what they do?
That's why
yeah.
we see Ned Stark cleaning his sword at the pool under the window after he does the execution. Yep.
Yeah. I watch Michael Talks About Stuff. I should know this.
I did a Weirwood roundup. Michael and I have a lot of overlap. We come to some different conclusions, but actually, like, he was a big help on my Weirwood, on the Naga's Bones theory. We sat down. Michael is great. Everybody in the audience, Michael Talks About Stuff is phenomenal.
Subscribe to Michael Talks About Stuff. And subscribe to Meera Reads.
Yay. We have a good time.
Yeah.
I'll save. I had one more thought about this, about the blood sacrifice and the Weirwoods and everything, but I want to save it for the spoiler section.
Okay, gotcha. Let's move on to Rhaenyra this episode. I thought Rhaenyra was very interesting this episode because I could sort of deduce like a dramatic shift in her character. And I think that was mostly due to her conversation with Alicent last episode. Because in many ways, like, that conversation with Alicent gave her like a lot of closure. Like, not only did it give her closure in regards to, oh, like, did Viserys actually name Aegon as his heir, like, during the final hours of his life? She got that cleared up, and now, you know, she has closure in regards to that. But also, Alicent was her last, like, font of hope. And maybe, like, if Alicent agreed with Rhaenyra during that talk, they might have been able to prevent a war, or maybe, like, found an agreeable solution. But now that Alicent is unwilling to cooperate, like, all hope is lost. And in a way, like, that is closure too. Knowing that, like, 100% Alicent will not cooperate. And so I think she's walking into this episode with a lot of resolve. And, you know, she's willing to send out dragons now. I feel like that will continue into the future episodes. I've been seeing people online, though, really complaining about Rhaenyra's character, and complaining specifically about the lack of action that she seems to be willing to take. Do you have this same issue, Meera? And do you see this?
No.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. I don't have that issue. I feel like that where Rhaenyra was the past 3 episodes was extremely reasonable from both an emotional standpoint and a political standpoint, although that might be like a bit of a hot take, right?
Well, and from a logistical standpoint, see, the people who are complaining about Rhaenyra are displaying their ignorance. So if Rhaenyra and Aegon both have an air force, Rhaenyra has more planes, Aegon has better planes, and they both have a shit ton of napalm, all right? So they both have an air force. Rhaenyra currently has the Navy. Rhaenyra is using her Navy to blockade and is trying to sanction Aegon into submission using economic tactics. This is good. This is a smart thing to do. Stannis did this in Clash of Kings and in season 2 of Game of Thrones. What Aegon lacks in a navy on the Narrow Sea, he makes up for by having a land army. And so this is why I always pull up the map in my videos, that Rhaenyra's 2 alliances are the Vale and the North. The Vale is cut off from the rest of Westeros by the Mountains of the Moon. And we know that winter is coming. Cragen Stark says this in season 2, episode 1.
Yes.
That, you know, this is still a summer or an autumn snow, but he's saying, like, we're getting ready for winter. Like, it's going to be winter very soon. When winter hits, the Vale army cannot traverse the Mountains of the Moon. So they would have to come by boat.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And expensive, right?
Yeah.
And Cragen's army from the north, they're not going to be able to march south in the middle of winter. Like, he's sending the winter wolves, but it's going to take them time to get together. And the north is the size of all of the rest of Westeros put together. Versus, so this is why, and that small council scene was great. And Aemond and Criston Cole kind of lay it out. They are taking opposite approaches to what Daemon is doing. That's why Aemon and Daemon are both gunning for Harrenhal, because the Riverlands are the key to this war. That whoever holds the Riverlands, whoever holds Harrenhal, can block the advance of the other army, because Aegon's army is going to be coming from the Reach and the Westerlands. They're going to have to come through the Riverlands. They're going to have to come close to Harrenhal.
Yeah.
And so what Cole is doing is marching from King's Landing outward. That he had a force to begin with, a Hightower force. He already had an army. and he's, snowballing like Robert Baratheon did and picking people up along the way and come join the war with us.
Mm-hmm.
And people either join in or he beats them into submission. And every castle he stops at, he increases the size of his army. So he picks up Rosby and Stoteworth, and then Gawain and everybody else, they expect Kristen to turn west, because at this point they have an army and Daemon has no army. That Daemon cut right to the end and took Harrenhal by himself, but Harrenhal has no it's very expensive to maintain. It doesn't have the incomes necessary to maintain the castle, meaning they don't have a lot of peasants. So what Daemon, if Daemon were to meet Cole in the field, he would have to scoop the Tullys, the Blackwoods, probably the Pipers, but certainly the Freys.
Yeah.
And this is why whichever side the Freys go to always wins, because they have the largest army in the Riverlands, and the Riverlands is going to be the key to pretty much any war. So all of that to say, what Cole does, so how is Rhaenyra going to fight these people with no army? Right? Everybody's like, why does the Rhaenyra go? I'm sorry, I don't mean to mock you. I'm like mocking random internet strangers. I can use the voice.
Random internet guy? Come on. Anyways, no.
No. Random humans on the internet. Rhaenyra doesn't go to with what army? With what army are we proposing that Rhaenyra goes to war right meow?
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't have one. And because the vassal lords that she has in the Crown lands, they're on islands, the Estermonts and the Celtigars, the Estermonts are at Rook's Rest.
And even the Velaryons.
Right, yeah, the Velaryons are also on an island. Like, they have a castle guard, but they don't have large swaths of peasants. The Velaryons are wealthy because they do sea trading. They're not collecting rents like most lords.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason that Criston Cole lays the trap that he does, like he says that this is the only point on land that we have not taken yet. It is the only point on land that Rhaenyra still has access to the mainland.
Mm-hmm.
And it's held by one of her small council members. And Rhaenyra does not have an army right now. So Rhaenyra must defend this castle. She cannot let them take it without a fight. And she has no one to send. That by the time she loaded up enough Velaryon men on a ship to get there, it would be too late.
Mm-hmm.
So Criston Cole, and in the book, I think it's meant to be that they set a trap for Jace. I think Criston Cole and Aemond meant it to be a trap for Rhaenyra. Mm. And so going all the way back to the beginning when we talked about Rhaenyra and the small council and Jace, there's no way Jace versus Aemond on Vhagar, he'd be eaten. I mean, we saw that happen with Luke. Rhaenyra probably would have stood a better chance, but Rhaenys was absolutely correct. Meleys was the only dragon big enough to not be shredded in seconds.
Yeah.
And so, long story longer, yes, Rhaenyra could have deployed all of her dragons immediately, but I would like everybody to go back and watch the battle at Rook's Rest and watch Vhagar. Vhagar burned and stepped on a bunch of Criston Cole's men. Criston Cole almost died because of Vhagar. The reason the dragons are not a power meant to be trifled with is that they don't care about people. They will eat people. Daenerys' dragon ate a little girl in Meereen. They are monsters, and they are dangerous. And if you are going to deploy them, much like using napalm, which is a war crime, or if it's not, it should be, I would hope that people are doing it for a good reason. And so in Rhaenyra's case, as far as a battle strategy, and overall war strategy, she could either send a dragon or let them take Rook's Rest and then send people by boat and try to take it back by siege. But where's I going with all this? I'm sorry, I got like
No worries, no
way
worries.
detailed with that.
I think we were originally talking about if you agree. Oh yeah, no.
Yep. So that conversation that she has with Alicent, I was actually going to push back on you on one thing that you said.
Okay.
That you said Alicent refused, or that she wouldn't accept Rhaenyra's olive branch. So I ended my episode 3 video saying Alicent was telling the truth.
Ooh, yeah, I watched this one. I watched this one. Yeah, but yeah, you explain it. Yeah.
Yeah, so she says, there was no mistake, Rhaenyra, it's too late. So by there was no mistake, it means ultimately this was out of Alicent's control. Yes, Alicent believed that Viserys changed his mind, and Alicent told everybody that he changed his mind, and that is the story that they ran with publicly. But if we recall, in the Green Council, Tywin Lannister opens by saying, oh, so we shall proceed with our long-laid plans. They were going to do it anyway. There was no mistake. This was going to happen regardless of Viserys' wishes. There's no mistake. It's too late. That even if, like, let's say Alicent wanted to correct this mistake, and I think in a previous episode she did, because she was asking if there had been
about
any letters from Rhaenyra.
Yeah, in episode 1, I think, yeah.
Yeah, because Rhaenyra put off reading Alicent's letter. That what happened, that in season 1, episode 9, Alicent is acting through primarily Kristen Cole and Aemond, who are very loyal to her. And over the first half of season 2, we have seen her relationships with both of them fracture. If Rhaenyra had come with this before Aegon sacked Otto, before Kristen Cole was promoted, I think she might have, it might have still been too late. But at this point, and I really try to harp on this, Alicent has no money, Alicent has no sword, Alicent has no army, and she effectively has no title. The Dowager Queen, it's an honorary thing. She has no inherent power in the kingdom. Cersei only had power in Game of Thrones because she was a regent, because her children were minors. Aegon is an adult. Alicent is decorative at this point. So she's absolutely right. It's too late. You know, we could have had this conversation a couple weeks ago, and maybe, you know, I could have convinced my father and my slightly less deranged son to wrangle my deranged son into doing something reasonable. But now, no, it's too late, Rhaenyra. There was no mistake. So I thought it was so good. It's so good. I love them both, and Olivia is such a brilliant actor, and
they both are. Maybe the correct phrase I should have used was instead of Alicent refused Rhaenyra's offer, that Alicent recognized that peace was never an option, and you can think about that goose meme, you know. So maybe I misspoke there.
It was and you know, and in a way she did refuse, because a more naive and hopeful Alicent might have said, oh, well, I'll take this to the king and see what he says.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, she you know, she knows that's not gonna work. So I mean, in a sense, yes, she did refuse, because she's saying, like, no, I'm not even gonna try. But I think, given the point we are at in the progression of this war, that now, you know, everybody in the city has been turned against Rhaenyra. They did this whole funeral procession, and you know, the announcer guy is like, this is the work of the evil Rhaenyra Targaryen. She kills children. She's not gonna be safe in that city.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, so she did refuse, but I think a lot of the women characters in the show overall, I feel like, get an inordinate amount of hate.
Yeah,
doing
right?
logical things, you know.
which which is really unfair. Because I know that this was true for Game of Thrones, but there was a large audience back when Game of Thrones was a thing, who just watched the show for like the big battles and people killing each other. And to me, like, the entire point of the story is like completely antithetical to that. It's an anti-war story. It's about how war ravages everything around it, and like the innocent people suffer the most. Like the reason we had Feast for Crows was to show us just that. Like we paused for one book just to see the devastation of the War of the Five Kings in the books. So
you taking in all this plate, kids? Sorry. It's a vacation reference.
but yeah, I think a lot of people who complain about the quote unquote like lack of action that these women characters take are kind of the same people who only watched Game of Thrones for the big battle sequences, and I think that's not the right mindset to be in when talking about A Song of Ice and Fire, and yeah.
Yeah, and this actually sparked another, when you said that about, the story being anti-war, here is one criticism I think I can fairly lay at Rhaenyra's feet.
Okay.
And this is consistent.
Yeah.
One of the ways that Jaehaerys the Conciliator was able to maintain peace, that, like, there were a few little skirmishes here and there, but for the most part, he reigned over decades of peace in Westeros. And that is in part because he went to extreme lengths to understand the country he was ruling. And he would do his processions like Aegon the Conqueror did, but they were much smaller. And Alicent would go and listen to the women. And he was going through and codifying everything and building roads and, like I said, understanding the people that he was to be ruling over. Now, for Jaehaerys, that meant getting to know his lords. But for Alicent, it was listening to the women and the common people. And Rhaenyra has done exactly none of that. That she ended her progress early when she was supposed to be looking for a consort. When she went to Aegon's birthday party, season 1, episode 3, when they're in a carriage, Viserys said, I had hoped you would accompany me on the hunt. And I didn't catch it the first time. Like, my first time watching it, I was seeing everything from Rhaenyra's perspective, because once upon a time, I was also a 15-year-old girl, and I know what that feels like. Mm-hmm. But the second time through, I was seeing it more and more from Viserys' perspective as the parent. And what he was saying is, you're my heir. And where it falls in the conversation, it's very clear that that's what he's saying, but Rhaenyra isn't hearing that. Viserys wants Rhaenyra, a woman, to come on the hunt with him to show everybody his heir at his right-hand side, that yes, this is Aegon's birthday party, but this is my heir, and my heir is going to come with me to kill the White Hart. Well, I mean, he doesn't know there's White Hart yet. And we see this come to roost in, like I said, Rhaenyra cut her progress short at Storm's End. It comes back to roost at Storm's End in season 1, episode 10, that she sends this letter to Lord Baratheon, and some people think there is Maester interference, that, like, the Maester read the letter wrong. I absolutely believe Rhaenyra wrote a very clumsy, bossy letter to Lord Baratheon, because, like, she doesn't know him. Yeah. And, the last time she was there was, how many years ago? 15 years ago or more at this point. And, he feels slighted. Like, who are you to call me up like a dog? And it sounds, in the book, it sounds rude. It's like, don't talk to the queen that way. But from this perspective of that, like, Rhaenyra has been almost delinquent in this duty. I think his offense is warranted to a degree. Um, and that he said, I might have done this for Rhaenys because like she's my blood relation, and that was kind of what Rhaenyra relied on with the Eyrie, that her mother was an Arryn.
Yeah.
But yeah, like if we want to lay a great mistake and something Rhaenyra could have done to prevent the war, it would be a better statesman.
Sure. Yeah. Like go on the royal progresses and all that.
Yeah, like get to know your people, care about the land and the realm that you are going to be ruling over.
Yeah, that's a really interesting, I think, deficit that you point out. And I think like, the entire time I was thinking like, oh yeah, that it makes sense why people in King's Landing don't recognize her when she was walking through the streets. Like she probably never cared to like meet them.
Yeah.
Which might be a bit cope, but I think there's truth to that.
Well, I think as a child she was not permitted to.
Oh yeah.
So I think that's a little bit more excusable. That like the first time she goes out into the cities with Daemon, like prior to that, I think Daemon was absolutely correct in his assessment, season 1, episode 1, that the city was lawless and dangerous. He's like, you gave me the gold cloaks because the city was a terrifying, lawless wasteland, and so I am fixing that for you. And then she's having her babies, and I can say when you are raising like infants, children under the age of 18 months or so, like you don't really leave the house. Like I never left the house. And then once the boys were like old enough to be doing stuff, she went and lived on Dragonstone. Yeah. So I think not getting out into King's Landing proper, I think was a little more excusable. But I think when she was an older teenager around that kind of episode 4, episode 5 area, she could have been going to the Sept with Alicent. That they're like we saw Marjorie do. Bringing food to the people of King's Landing and praying in the Sept, things like that. Yeah.
But, yeah, that's an interesting point that you raise about Rhaenyra. And, a large portion of, like, why people were okay with, Targaryen incest during Jaehaerys's rule was because, like, he had a campaign, an entire campaign, that he sent, like, 7 people to talk about how the Targaryens having incest, like, that was okay. And, that worked, right? That worked. So if Rhaenyra or, like, Viserys, if they didn't want to go out there and meet the small folk themselves, I'm positing that maybe they should have sent like a PR team to get people on board with the idea that, oh hey, maybe a woman can be queen of the 7 kingdoms,
and I think Alysanne was beloved.
Yes.
And people seemed to respect. So it's mentioned in the book that Rhaenys and Visenya were, the only queens to sit on the Iron Throne and make decisions in Aegon's absence, like as equals.
Yeah.
So there is precedent for this, and Alysanne came closest to occupying that kind of space. Like she wasn't quite his equal, but she would hold her own courts and things. So the big hiccup here is that Viserys cannot go on a grand progress because he has leprosy and his dragon is dead. So, and you don't want to send your daughter out on a dragon by herself. Mm-hmm. That you can send men on land to like follow her. But your unwed virgin teenage daughter, you don't want to send out into the wild. So he would have had to send a chaperone. He could have sent Rhaenys. That it could have been a progress of Rhaenys, Laena, Laenor, and Rhaenyra.
Sure, yeah.
But that would have to be, I think Rhaenys would require a betrothal. Well, but she didn't want that, right? Because Laenor was gay. The other option would be marry Rhaenyra to Daemon immediately, and then you can't send the two of them alone if they're not married, but if they are married, then they can go together. And then it's fine. She's also still, not traveling by herself. But that would have required trust in Daemon. And you see, we almost unravel this, but there is a way to make it work. I'm sure. Well, and actually, because Daemon winds up marrying Laena, so here's Viserys' pitch to Rhaenys. He says, okay, you don't want to marry Laena or to Rhaenyra, that's fine. Daemon marries Laena. You are married into the royal family now.
Yeah.
Or Laena marries Aegon instead of Aegon marrying Helena. And then you take Rhaenyra on her progress because, Rhaenys as a married woman, as a matron, as like an aunt figure could chaperone Rhaenyra on this. And I think that, and Meleys is the big dragon. Oh my God, that would have been so cute. Now I want to progress of Rhaenys and Rhaenyra.
Yeah, but unfortunately that ship has long since sailed. And now we're here.
It would have been so cool.
Yeah. Now we're here at the Dance of the Dragons. Speaking of Rhaenys, she's such a good character. I love her so much.
She's mom.
I
feel like my mom, whenever she steps in to do mom things, I'm like, that's my mom.
Yeah. That's great. I love the affection that she shows towards Meleys, because this is Meleys that she's hugging in this image, and I find it so cute. And all of the dragons in this show, as destructive as they are, they're just animals, and they're cute, and they just want to sleep and eat sheep and go on walks. Ugh, it sucks. But yeah, Rhaenys. I said this a couple of times before, but for me, Rhaenys occupies a similar role that Davos did in the Game of Thrones books, or the Game of Thrones show specifically. I'm thinking of just the advisor that knows exactly what to say and has all of these cool ass one-liners that they use in all of the trailers. And Rhaenys is just super cool. And I wanted to ask you, do you think this is a satisfying conclusion for Rhaenys' arc? And do you think there's anything in her story that should have been expanded more upon, I guess?
So the writers were boxed in by the story that George wrote. Because the loss of Meleys, even more so than the loss of Rhaenys, although really the loss of both of them must needs spark action on Daemon's part, because with Meleys and Rhaenys gone, Rhaenyra and her children, or Rhaenyra and Jace really, on Dragonstone are exposed.
Yeah. And Caraxes is the next largest dragon. But he's gone.
And so there is no one else, that Rhaenys has been acting as Hand of the Queen. So unless Daemon comes back, there's a power vacuum here that must be filled. And Corlys, I think, can be Hand for a week. I think but he's not a dragon rider. And we know that Daemon was trying to do some dragon magic stuff. Sorry, I'm getting way off topic.
No worries.
I think Rhaenys in herself found peace. She made peace a long time ago with the idea of not being queen. She got the ball rolling, I think, in a very good direction on shifting the world in a way that, okay, well, if I can't do it, let Rhaenyra do it. That I think she's come to a place where she respects Rhaenyra. And I actually watched an interview clip earlier today with, I think Eve Best is her name.
Yes.
She's lovely. And that in a way, she's the last of this dragon riding generation. She's the last of Jaehaerys's grandchildren.
Yeah.
And that it, well, no, Daemon, I guess also. Daemon is so weird that, like, generationally, he is, you know, Rhaenys' cousin and Viserys' brother, but in many ways he seems to occupy the same generation as Alicent and Rhaenyra and Laena and Laenor, you know?
Yeah, because because he's married to Rhaenyra, so yeah.
Right. But so it ups the stakes for Rhaenyra in terms of progressing the plot. That mommy is gone and the monsters are that much closer now. And, you know, she saw Rhaena going off to safety. Baela now has a place at court. You know, her betrothal seems to be very good and very strong. She's a very strong dragon rider. She's working with her crossbow. That, as much as I would love to have Rhaenys forever and make her immortal and also my actual mom, that I think she got everything into as good of an order as she could, and she knew that this was kind of a suicide mission.
Gotcha. Do you want to talk about Rhaenys a little bit more, or do you want to move on to talking about Rhaenys a bit in relation to the battle that happens? If you have some thoughts that you haven't shared yet, go ahead, but I would like to talk about Rhaenys in relation to what she did in the battle, if that's fine.
So, well, there was one thought that I had, because we've been pushing back at the fandom a little bit.
Yeah,
I've seen in the last few days some people comparing Rhaenys' treatment of Alan to Catelyn's treatment of Jon Snow in that scene in Game of Thrones when Catelyn goes, like, you know, get out, I wish it was you instead of Bran. And I just want to say to anybody in the fandom who's saying this, like, yes, these are two things that you can compare. These are two noble women, interacting with their lord husband's bastard son. And I just want to point out the fundamental and glaring difference between these moments, that Catelyn is sitting at the bedside of her dying 7-year-old, knowing that her husband is about to, like, leave her forever, and, you know, her whole family might be going off to die. She's out of her mind. She hasn't been eating or sleeping. And, you know, she and Jon Snow have never had a good relationship. And so in this very vulnerable, fractured, borderline insane state, she says something extremely unkind, you know, cruel to Jon. Rhaenys just walks up to this guy who's an adult and doesn't live in her house, and she isn't in, you know, other than a looming war in the background, she doesn't really have much else going on. You know, it's apples and oranges. You can compare apples and oranges, but you must needs recognize that one is an apple and one is an orange. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, and like, Rhaenys didn't say anything hurtful to Alan. In fact, like, when speaking to Corlys, like, just moments later, she told him that, like, Alan should be rewarded for what he did, and, like, Alan's past is no fault of his.
Well, so people are saying Catelyn, this is evidence of Catelyn being that much more evil, because Rhaenys is behaving properly, and Catelyn is evil and mean. And I'm like, Rhaenys was just bopping around at the dock. Like, Catelyn, like, you sit at the bedside of your dying 7-year-old and tell me how sane and coherent you are. You know?
Very true. Very true.
Sorry, Catelyn haters really get under my skin.
No worries. Yeah, no. We can do a whole other video about Catelyn. I do really love Catelyn, and I'm really interested in seeing how her story maybe wraps up in the Winds of Winter. But yeah, that's probably another video.
So I'm so sorry. I realize I do this I do this rhetorical thing where I speak in the second person, but I'm not addressing you. I am
Yeah.
addressing my straw man.
Yeah, no
So
worries.
that was the straw man you, not
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
Viper you.
That was random internet guy. I
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I got it. Okay. Um do you want to move on to the big battle of this episode, the dragon battle?
Yeah.
Okay. First off, look at this size disparity, by the way. That I like first off, like this is a really great shot for many different reasons. Like it shows us the size disparity between Meleys and Vhagar, and this is also, the point of view of these soldiers. So, um you get to sort of experience what they are looking at. And yeah, this is just a really great shot. But specifically, the thing I wanted to talk about with Rhaenys is people were sort of debating why she went back for like a second round of fighting when it looks like she might have been able to escape. I have a theory as to why she did this, and I think that this sort of moment was foreshadowed back in episode 9 of last season. Another scene that was critiqued very harshly by the fans, where Rhaenys bursts out of the floor and could have killed Aegon and Aemond and the entirety of the Greens, but chose not to. I feel like in this moment where she has the option of flying away, I feel like she feels I think she feels guilty about letting Aegon and Aemond go the first time around, and I feel like she thinks that this is her best. This is like the best chance she's ever gonna get at like correcting her mistakes. Um, and yeah, that's why I think she did what she did. What about you? Do you have any thoughts, opinions?
I have a similar thought. It's a little bit. I don't think what Rhaenys did in episode 9 was a mistake.
Okay.
I think it was a very deliberate choice. I don't want to like spoil it too much because I am still sitting on my episode 9 video essay. um, but but she says this, she's like, it was not my war to start, and she is reluctant to kinslaying, right? That these are her cousins, but as far as the family structure, they're kind of like her nephews. She loved Viserys, and these are Viserys' sons.
Mm-hmm.
And much in the way that she's been acting like Rhaenyra's mom, in a parallel universe, Rhaenys could have been their mom too. So she's not the kind of person to kill somebody's children and kill her family in cold blood. Those aren't the values that she holds. I think it would fundamentally undermine her character for her to flame broil them. But also, coming up through the floor, it shows us Rhaenys, like Rhaenyra, has very little respect for the common people.
Mm.
That the not the whatever the dais that they were standing on was over the tunnel that the dragons normally come up through. So Rhaenys made a choice. She could have come up through the tunnel and blown through the royal family. She chose to come up through the floor under the peasants because they are disposable.
Yeah.
Right. So again, Rhaenys is not without flaws, but I think that is sort of the flaw in her character, not her reluctance to kinslaying. And I think killing Helena would have been very wrong.
Yeah,
in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And Aegon's son was still at the Red Keep, and we know Daeron is alive. Daeron is in Old Town.
Yeah.
So even if Rhaenys had barbecued Aemond and Aegon and Otto and Criston Cole, there still would have been a war. The Hightowers would have rallied behind Daeron, and now the entire war is Rhaenys' fault, and Rhaenyra is absolutely in the wrong, and Rhaenyra hasn't been crowned yet.
That's a very fair point. Yeah.
Yeah. But so as far as her turning around, now that war has been declared, because the other thing is Rhaenys is in many ways a good soldier. She is a good soldier in a way that Daemon is not. That Rhaenyra appointed Rhaenys to be, patrolling the gullet. And that's what Rhaenys does in Rhaenyra's absence, and she holds to that, because Daemon tries to order her to go to King's Landing, and she says, "Would that you were the king."
Yeah. Great line.
And, I just love her. Now, Rhaenyra has ordered her to defend Rook's Rest. And, that she wasn't going to go and fight Aemond without orders. She wasn't going to undermine the queen. But now that she has those marching orders, I think...
Ooh, yeah.
She sees this as like, this is her assigned duty. Also, so long as Baela is betrothed to Jace, and so long as Rhaena is guarding Rhaenyra's children and the little dragons, Aemond is a threat to her granddaughters. So I think as much as she doesn't want to kill these boys, even more so she doesn't want these boys and their dragons to kill her granddaughters. And so that, more than anything, I think is a totally legitimate and understandable reason for her to go on a suicide mission, because we saw how Meleys clawed Sunfire open and like all his guts were spilling out.
Yeah.
If Meleys could have landed some kind of shot on Vhagar, like going toe-to-toe in a wrestling match, Meleys is going to lose. But, if you can sink some kind of, wound into Vhagar, at the very least.
Or, like, knock Aemond off, right?
Yeah, or flaming Aemond, even, because Vhagar is not going to ride into war without a rider.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think Rhaenys went into that battle not wanting to die, but willing to fight to the death. And I think, given everything we know about her, given everything we know about the circumstances and the other characters surrounding her, I think it makes perfect sense. And it's a very beautiful and tragic ending for, I think, a fantastic character, a wonderful mother and grandmother and stateswoman. And, it could go on and on, but...
Yeah. Ugh. Can we just say, like, the poor dragons. I really liked the moment where they showed us, like, Sunfire nuzzling against Aegon and Rhaenys hugging Meleys, because it gets you, like... It tells you that these writers really care about their dragons, and their dragons... Sunfire's probably the only creature on this planet that, like, loves Aegon unconditionally, and you can and Rhaenys has been bonded with Meleys for like 40 plus years at this point. The show does a good job in like getting you invested in these dragons with how cool and awesome they are, but also they're living and breathing creatures, and like me as a person, I get really sensitive when it comes to like animal violence, like in episode 1 when she's kicked the dog, like I was not okay from that point onwards, and then the rest of that entire sequence happened and I was even more not okay, but yeah, like even seeing these CGI dragons getting killed like really got to me, and seeing Sunfire, right, like Sunfire probably thought Aegon was just taking him out to go for a walk and eat some ice cream or something, but like Aegon's taking Sunfire out to fight a war, and I doubt Sunfire realized what was going on until he got severely wounded by Meleys. And I'm sorry, I'm ranting about the dragons being cute, but I really love them. So I'm gonna do it some more, but you can see when Sunfire's falling, he's falling in a position where, like, if he falls to the ground, he's gonna crush Aegon. You know, it's belly up. He's gonna crush Aegon if he falls. But at the last second, Sunfire does like everything in his power to turn himself around and make sure Aegon doesn't get crushed. And later, when CC and Aemond finds him, Sunfire's like coiled around Aegon, despite being like wounded. And you know, I just find the dragons very, very touching. And oh my god, when Meleys knew that she was gonna die, and that look back at Rhaenys being both like an I'm sorry and a goodbye, that really got me as well. Yeah, I was not okay during this dragon fight. I get very sensitive to animals hurting each other. But yeah. Meera, do you have a favorite dragon? Are you emotionally attached to these dragons? What are your thoughts?
So I find cruelty to actual animals very disturbing. I giggled when you said about Cheese kicking the dog, not because I think kicking dogs is funny. I don't.
Yeah.
I was watching a Folding Ideas video last week, and he says it's a kick the dog moment, because it's shorthand for this is the easiest way to show
that a
your
character
evil
is
villain is evil. You have them kick a dog.
Yeah.
So I laugh because it's sort of like so excuse me, like in Archer, he has a Chekhov's gun,
mm-hmm.
and then he has the pen. And Cyril says, "Oh, if anything was going to go wrong," and Archer's like, "Yeah, you thought it would be the Chekhov's gun," or they have like the MacGuffin muffin, and so I love these writers that they were like, he kicks a dog.
He has to be evil.
Yeah, but like it's sort of like jumping the shark, is shorthand for like when things become unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you have an ocean movie and then somebody jumps over a shark at the point in the movie where things become unbelievable. Yeah. Kicking the dog in this episode is sort of the same. Or like in Arrested Development, they'll do segues, and it will be Job riding by on his Segway. I love these things, these little meta nods to the screenwriting nerds. But so as far as the dragons, I'm like team Maesters, team Children, team Smallfolk as far as it goes with the dragons.
Okay.
They are unnatural, fire-breathing monster demons, and they eat people. And I think hunting apex predators is wrong. I don't think we should be going into the ocean and killing sharks or lions or anything, because lions might eat people. I mean, they don't really eat people, but they could. But I think it is very wrong for the Valyrians to have bred the dragons either as pets or as tools of conquest. And we way back at the beginning of the video, we talked about family curses. And this is why I think the idea of parenting is so important in this story about the fall of House Targaryen and the dismantling of the House of the Dragon is the House of the Dragon, is that the dragons, like Viserys says, in a way, are a family curse. The dragons were created through blood magic. Tiny plug for my dragon video, everybody. It's my best video about the creation of dragons in Summerhall. It's a all-you-can-eat buffet of dragon lore. But, so yes, on an individual level, Sunfire was very young. And I don't think they're... I think they are animals in the way that, like, Ghost is an animal. Ghost understood language. Like, Jon could have a conversation with Ghost, and Ghost could understand abstract concepts.
Yeah.
So my personal pet theory is that the these dragons, the dragons that can be ridden, the sentient dragons, are powered or are given life and sentience through the spirits of dead Targaryen children.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah.
So,
I have heard that theory bouncing around, and I do think that there is some merit to that. Like, I don't know the specifics of it, or like how that could actually work, but I definitely do think that dragons are more sentient than we think.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this is brought up a lot, and it's something Tyrion harps on. Tyrion is kind of our Septon Barth stand-in. Sort of like whenever Barth says something about dragons, we can pretty much believe it. I think the same is true for Tyrion, as far as old dragon lore. But I won't spill my whole theory here, but yeah, it's all in the video about the babies and everything. And Company of the Cat actually has a similar theory about the stillbirths, but mine is tied up more in Fae lore, and I talk about the parallels between the direwolves and the dragons a little bit.
Ooh, yeah.
And so I would grieve for Sunfire in the same way that like I might grieve for Jaehaerys. There is a human child in there that has not had time to see the world. And again, not to say that I can't have empathy for animals, but the dragons as... Oh, and here's kind of the difference between the dragons and the direwolves, is direwolves are like animals. You don't have to breed or create direwolves. They existed on the planet as their own mammal. Yeah. Whereas the dragons are were most likely created by Valyrian experimentation with genetics.
Yes.
Breeding fireworms with wyverns.
Yeah.
And I think that's really messed up, and maybe you should not play God with genetics in order to make weapons of mass destruction. I think maybe that is bad.
Yeah.
I know that's a hot take, but...
Definitely.
I think maybe that prevents me from feeling as much empathy toward the dragons as I might toward Cheese's dog or Ghost, etc.
That's fair. That's an interesting take. Yeah, I definitely do agree with you. Genetic experimentations to create weapons of mass destruction, that is very bad. For me, it's just on like a basic level. I see a creature getting hurt on screen. I don't like it. It reminds me of cats getting hurt or like dogs getting hurt, and that makes me sad.
Yeah. And I think if I really sat down and thought about it, I would feel the same way. I think I threw up kind of a mental block.
Yeah, which is fair. Because these are fantastical creatures. These are CGI fire-breathing flying lizards. So yeah, there's definitely... Yeah. It's definitely easier to have a mental block with these dragons. Yeah.
And what was it? There's a thought. Oh, it left me. It'll come back.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about some spoilers, by the way? Let's just like lift the curtain and talk about some spoilers.
Oh yeah, actually, while we're talking about the death of dragons.
We're in spoiler territory now, guys.
Yay. So there was a big one I wanted to touch on earlier,
Gotcha.
if I may.
Yes. Which image do I get back to?
So I want to talk about Daemon, Aemond, Harrenhal, and the Isle of Faces, if you have an image for any of those.
Let's go to Alice, because Harrenhal, she's spooky. Or maybe this one.
Yeah. This one? Alice even tells Daemon, "You're gonna die here."
Yeah. Which he does.
Yeah, this is gonna ruin the rest of the season for you. Like, this is not just a spoiler. This is possibly the spoiler of the entire series. If you don't want to hear the biggest spoiler in existence, skip ahead.
Or just close the video. But yeah, go on.
Yeah. So we know Daemon and Aemond kill each other with their dragons over God's Eye.
Yeah.
That Daemon finishes Rhaenys' mission. Oh, that was what I was thinking earlier. If Daemon had not run off to Harrenhal like a pouty brat, if he had stuck around and been a good soldier like Rhaenys, Daemon and Rhaenys together, I think, could have taken out Vhagar and Sunfire.
I think it's almost definitive. Like,
yeah,
having Meleys do the death spiral while Caraxes nibbles on Vhagar's wings or something. Like, yeah.
So, that again, Daemon ran off against orders, was, being frankly kind of selfish, unwilling to accept consequences or admit wrongdoing. And his cousin is dead now, and his wife is defenseless. So, we know that Daemon and Aemond, I always feel, even if we're in a spoiler zone, I feel like I'm having to drag it out of myself. They both want Harrenhal, and they will fight. They will fight over the God's Eye.
Yeah.
And we've seen this before with Maegor and Aegon the Uncrowned, his nephew. Yeah. They also fight over the God's Eye, and Aegon and his dragon die. And so we were talking about blood sacrifice to the Weirwoods. It's
my God.
It's literally called God's Eye.
Yeah. That would be like the biggest, or like one of the biggest blood sacrifices there. Like, besides like Balerion and Quicksilver. Yeah.
So, in some way, I think the fact that Harrenhal is this bloody, bloody castle that is always the centerpiece of any war.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's right on God's Eye, all the blood is almost going down the drain in the center of the continent into God's Eye. And so, we talked about what purpose might Alis and Larys have in this, and specifically messing with Daemon and Aegon, or Daemon and Aemond. Maybe her whole entire purpose is she wants 2 dragons and 2 princes to die in the lake to feed her trees.
Oh,
maybe that is her sole and only purpose.
All right. Yeah. Damn. And yeah, she does get her wish in the end. I have this really cool image in my head where, we're in season 3 or season 4 and Daemon and, maybe Nettles is with him. Maybe she's not. But Daemon is, like, patrolling all over the Riverlands to find Aemond. And, he doesn't know where to... Well, he knows where to look deep down. But he's, like, hopping from castle to castle, being like, oh, okay, I just really want to find him. But deep down, he knows that Aemond will be at Harrenhal. And maybe the both of them know that they will fight at Harrenhal. Like, that's the image in my mind, that Daemon's like searching all over the Riverlands, but like deep down he knows where he's gonna die, and maybe Aemond does as well. And yeah, the
other thing that I really like about it, we talked about Rhaenys kind of accepting, that she goes in to defend Rook's Rest and try and stop the boys, knowing that she could die. And, we saw Meleys just really ultimately not be able to fight Vhagar.
Yeah.
And Meleys put up a good fight considering how outmatched she was.
Yeah.
That, again, spoilers, the way Daemon handles this fight is he jumps onto Vhagar to kill Aemond. And it is suicidally insane that Daemon takes what Rhaenys did and dials it up to 11. Like, he's like, okay, if I'm going to do a suicide mission, I'm going to do a suicide mission.
Yeah.
Because once Rhaenyra has a fighting force, the only thing really standing between her and victory is Vhagar.
Yeah.
As things stand right now, that the Velaryons have all this money, the Velaryons hold Blackwater Bay, they have the best navy, and that the Hightower Westerlands Tyrell army really only has the desire to fight, because of Aemond and Criston Cole. And so if they lose Aemond and Vhagar, like, there aren't really any other dragon riders for Team Green. Helena, like, we don't ever see Helena outriding her dragon.
Yeah.
Aegon is out of commission. So it's kind of like, that's that.
Yeah. And Daeron, his dragon, is probably like, the size of Vermax. So not that large.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and Aemond is, sort of the other chief strategist for the war. That this trap at Rook's Rest was brilliant. It was, like, extremely well executed. And the only thing that threw it off was
fucking Aegon. Jeez.
Because he was drinking.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, that was something we didn't talk about that I really liked. I think a lot of the audience didn't, but I loved.
Okay.
That at the end of season 1, Aemond, gets into, like, a dogfight with Luke up in the sky, and loses control over Vhagar and kills Luke. Yeah. And Aemond does feel guilty about this, and a lot of people thought that it was like him, that it didn't fit his character, and I was like, no, he knew Luke was younger and smaller, that Luke's dragon was a lot smaller. Like, I don't think Aemond wanted to turn into a bully and an abuser like his brother.
I feel like it's a front that he feels like he's forced to put on, is my take. But yeah, continue.
And he's still young, and this was something that Rhaenys brought up in the very first episode, that these young men don't understand war, and they don't understand consequences. So this was Aemond's first real taste of consequences. And all Aemond learned from this is that nobody did anything to stop him because he has the biggest dragon in the world. And so now, when shown the opportunity to exact revenge on the person who actually abused him, and on someone who arguably kind of does deserve to die, because Aegon II is not a good person. Mm-hmm. He occasionally looks like one, but he's not. Anybody who leaves their children to fight and die in child fighting pits is a bad person, full stop.
Yes.
So, that a lot of people were like, oh, well, why would Aemond do that? And I was like, because it's a boss move, and it was cool, and I love it. And now he's not doing it by accident anymore. It was very calculated. And he knows his mother's not going to stop him. Otto is gone. And I love that power move when Aemond walks away at the end of the episode, and Criston Cole is like, fuck my job.
Yeah.
He's the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, and now the king is barbecued.
Yeah. And what does Aemond get for doing this? He only gets promoted. He becomes the Lord Protector now. Yeah. And that's only going to enable him to, like, do more horrible things in the future. That's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, like, I think, unlike Aegon, I think there was a timeline. I think there was a parallel universe where Aemond turned into a decent person and had time to mature, much like Daemon. That maybe he was always going to be a little wild and a little unhinged, but there was a timeline where he grew up to be a decent man. Yeah. I think we are rapidly moving away from that timeline.
Yeah. Especially with the next couple of episodes.
Mm-hmm. And we started seeing this with Criston Cole. His major turning point was season 1, episode 5. And a lot of people complained about this moment too when he killed Joffrey Lonmouth.
Yeah.
And I blame Glidus a little bit for this. Hey, Glidus. That he really called attention to it. And I believe Glidus could have done better, because Glidus is a smart guy. And I say that, having spoken with him about it. I'm not trying to be bitchy. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
We see prior to this Kristen Cole and Alicent having this conversation. Ooh, confessions. That's another theme. In Westeros, in the Faith of the Seven, you confess to the mother, and the mother forgives you.
Mm.
The father passes judgment, but the mother forgives you, and that's why Alicent, when she wants to confess her sins to her father, and he's like, I do not wish to hear it. And then in this episode, Helena looks at her like almost unprompted, because we know Helena's psychic, and she goes, I forgive you.
Mm-hmm.
The only person probably on the planet who could have forgiven Alicent is Helena, because Helena, first, is the person who she really wronged, and second, because Helena is a mother. So, Alicent, in this moment, is serving as sort of priest, confidant, and confessor to Kristen. And so he is sort of absolved of his sin of sleeping with Rhaenyra because he confesses to the mother.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Ooh, right?
That's
this
icky to think
so
about.
Good.
Oh.
People complain about this show, and I'm like, you deserve this show, people.
with all of the incest going on, and Alicul is somehow the grossest one. The grossest relationship.
Well, it is because it's a relationship of convenience for some of them, and the problem is it destroys the relationship that they previously had, that in a way, by holding to their values and their religious morals, they were keeping each other pure. That Kristen was the pure knight and defender, and Alicent was the mother and the vassal of forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they commit sin together, there can be no absolution, there can be no forgiveness. And Alicent sticks her head out the door, and I think Kristen says something like, "Oh, there is no atonement for what I've done," or something like that. But so as far as them sleeping together, I do like. I'm not wild about sex on screen, because sometimes I like to watch these shows with my parents, and I don't want to watch sex scenes with my parents. Yeah. I could think of a 1,000 things I would rather do.
Yeah.
But these serve a purpose that, in terms of a gauge on their morality, it gives us a barometer of where they're at. In terms of Alicent's agency and her outlook on the world, that we saw her being raped by Viserys as a child bride, dragged out of bed in the night when she didn't want to go. And it was very passive. She's dissociating from all of it. And then the next time we see Alicent having sex, she's getting head. And not only is she getting head, but in the most masculine power move stance she could possibly adopt. And I'm like, you know what? I love this for you. I don't love you as a character, but I love that you get to have this moment. Same. Oh, sorry?
I was just about to say, in a weird sort of way, her losing the power that she once had. She was once the queen, and now she's just the queen dowager. By her losing that power, she's kind of regaining her freedom, and so what does that say about the system? The people who are in power usually don't get what they want, and maybe wearing a crown is a responsibility. Cough, cough, Aegon.
Well, and
stuff like that.
It speaks a lot to the role of women, both in the real world and historically and within the story, Emma says to Rhaenyra in the first episode, "We have royal wombs, you and I."
Yeah.
Emma spent her entire adult life pregnant, her entire job
Yeah.
was to birth a boy for Viserys, and she died doing it.
Yeah.
And widows, out of, in terms of ways that women can have power within this society, you can have a Brienne of Tarth or a Jonquil Dark, who are warrior maidens, and now they have to be extra virginal because, you don't want to be accused of being a whore while you're a warrior, because then no one will take you seriously as a warrior. But that is one avenue you can take. Most can't. Most don't have the physical skill. They don't have access to the tools and the training. Their parents don't allow them. But that is possible. Another way is, being a septa, that you, as a septa, actually get a lot of agency in terms of, like, you are able to access spaces on your own, that no one is going to mistake a septa in the city for being a whore. And there's the whole concept of a woman unaccompanied must be a sex worker. So a woman even accompanied by her 5-year-old son is obviously not a sex worker, because a sex worker would not bring her 5-year-old child along. This woman is accompanied, therefore she is respectable. And so as far as women who can travel unaccompanied, we have warriors, priestesses, witches, right? We have Missaria and Alice. These are 2 women who can walk with their head upright, unaccompanied, without fear.
Yeah.
And, power that they have through magic. And in some ways they are priestesses of their own religions, although Missaria, we don't have confirmation that it's necessarily magical yet. But yeah, Melisandre as well. Melisandre can travel in the world, and people can call her a whore all she want. It has no impact on her power and standing in society.
Yeah.
By all means, call me a whore. Knock yourself out. And the step below kind of these very high power women, the step below that are widows and business owners. And especially widowed business owners. That the widow, the head of the Bakers Guild dies, and his widow has been running the shop with him for 50 years. She can take over now as head of the Bakers Guild as the widow, and now she's in charge. And I think somebody says this to Cersei, I think in Feast for Crows. It might be her chapter in Dance of Dragons. But he's like, yeah, everybody knows the horniness and sinfulness of widows, because now your womb is not, it doesn't matter anymore. Your husband is dead, and so you no longer have to operate as a baby factory. You can sleep with whoever you want. You can take as much birth control as you want. You can walk wherever you want. Like, prior to getting married, you have to protect your virginity, right? And while you're married, you have to protect your womb from any spunk that isn't your husband's. But once you're a widow, now granted, the other thing that I'm really saying is, like, if somebody attacks you while you're out in the city, like, you're not going to be penalized for it, which is a horrible way to think about it, but it's also kind of true. But that is that freedom. And I'm sorry, I just became like a whole thesis.
Yeah, no, this is great. This is why we're here.
I was a literature major. I don't know if I should have warned you. But yeah, so yes, Alicent, for the first time in her life, is no longer under the thumb of her father or her husband, and she is able to act in society as an individual, separate and apart from her womb. And I love that for her.
Yeah, and it's very strange because while she's obtaining more freedom, she's she doesn't have as much power over her sons, Aegon and Aemond. I'm wondering if Alicent, and we're in the spoiler section, so it's fine if I say this, but Alicent doesn't really do a whole lot during the dance. But in House of the Dragon, this entire show, it seems like it's very much hinged on Alicent and Rhaenyra. And I'm wondering if Alicent will have a much more active role in the story going forward, almost maybe like a Daemon figure to Aegon, in that, her loyalty to Aegon, or I guess Aemond now, like maybe it's challenged, right? Maybe she's discovering that, oh, like I really shouldn't be backing Aemond. And I definitely don't want to back the Blacks, but maybe I should
What?
like start my
Alicent. I'm sorry.
yeah, Alicent. Like I definitely don't want to back the Blacks, but maybe I sort of, go rogue, for a lack of a better term. Like, do you think this is a possibility? I really don't know what they're going to do with her, but that seems intriguing.
Well, so we saw. Oh, right. I went off on this tangent because I was talking about episode 5 and Criston Cole. Okay, we're back there now.
Yeah.
We saw Alicent acting through Criston Cole, who is her sworn shield, and Aemond, who is her loyal son.
Yes.
And Criston, we've seen getting away with more and more. And so people were upset that he killed Joffrey Lonmouth and there were no consequences. But we saw him have this moment of forgiveness with Alicent. And then right after that, he gets another scene where he's sitting with Alicent in that same confessional position. So they don't explain it, but it's made abundantly clear visually. Because I went back and watched it and I was like, yeah, like it didn't occur to me to question it at the time, I think, because they gave us that visual signal.
Yeah.
And I think I only thought to question it later. I blame Glytis for this. I know other people have brought it up. But every time Criston gets away with it, he becomes worse.
Yes.
Because now we've seen him. So it was Joffrey, and then he holds back in episode 7 when Alicent says, "Bring me the eye of Lucerys Velaryon."
Yeah.
And he doesn't do it. But then
he certainly thinks about it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, but yeah, then so episode. He gets in a fight with Harwin.
Yep.
And,
yeah.
No consequences for that.
No
consequences for pulling for killing
Eric,
Lord Beesbury.
Oh, Lord yeah. That's that. Oh my God. Yeah, that's right. And he gets fucking promoted to Lord Commander for that.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus.
And then he sends Eric out on a suicide mission to cover his own ass.
And then he becomes.
And then he gets promoted to hand.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so we see him at every turn being excused and rewarded for his brutal, brutish, stupid, dumbass behavior.
Yeah.
And Alicent is becoming more and more concerned about this because she was seeing the way the last council meeting she attended, she didn't like what she was seeing and hearing, and she didn't like Criston riding out.
Yeah.
That he's acting more and more cocksure, and he's no longer her subservient little boy, giving her head like we saw the last time they were hooking up. They're doing more of a BDSM power play thing, that he is reasserting himself as the man and as the dominant force in their sexual relationship. That was why we were talking about this. That was it. So the flip side of that, Criston Cole and Aemond are good buddies. Aemond was unflaggingly, unwaveringly loyal to Alicent the whole time because Alicent was the only member of the family who, he seemed to really care about. We saw in episode 7, Viserys says, who told you that they were bastards? And Alicent looks like she's going to throw up. And we see Aemond look at Alicent, and then he looks at Aegon, and he says, it was Aegon. Aemond lied to protect his mother. Yeah.
Wow. Man, these are... Yeah, this is news to me. I did not catch that, but yeah, good points.
Because it was twofold. A, Aemond doesn't give a shit about Aegon, and if Viserys was going to beat somebody, it might as well be my abuser.
Yeah.
But also, the one person in the room who Viserys really can't cut the tongue out of is Aegon. And in some ways, Aegon saved his own skin by saying, nobody told me, just look at them, and being a little shit. Like, you can tell he's not trying to be treasonous, he's just being a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
And he's drunk. So, but yeah, even as a child, Aemond was covering for his mother. And that's why he doesn't kill Aegon in episode 9.
Yeah.
Because Alicent ordered them to get Aegon, and he thinks about it. He thinks about it so hard. Kristen Cole is tied up with Eric.
Yeah.
And the moment passes, but you know, he did work hard on this in service to his mother. Now, the turning point, and I saw this in the trailer, he refers to her as Alicent in the trailer, and when he's talking to Kristen Cole in season 2, episode 1.
Yeah.
And he said, Alicent lied to put Aegon on the throne.
Yeah.
Aemond knew Viserys didn't want Aegon, and so Aemond lost respect for Alicent for that. That through all these years and all the pains and whatever in the family, he was loyal to her, but that was the thing that did it. You know, that, like, from his perspective, he's like, Mom, if you were gonna lie, like, why didn't you say that he picked me?
Oh,
you know?
Yeah, good point, because, like, if it... because he's definitely the better candidate.
I ride Vhagar, I'm loyal, I'm smart, I care about the job, and that's what he says, if they come looking for me, I mean to be found.
Yeah.
That, you know...
They could...
Especially...
Yeah. No, I was just saying that they could do so much with Aemond and Alicent's character with the next couple of episodes, because, like, we have 4 more episodes, and, like, at the very most, like, during episode 8, like, Aemond rides Vhagar to Harrenhal. But that gives us, like, 3 episodes to see Alicent and Aemond, like, their relationship start to change. And, yeah, like, I'm really interested in seeing what happens there.
Well, and so that's why we're not seeing Aemond at the castle. We're seeing him at the brothel with his mommy rapist.
Yeah.
He feels betrayed by his mother, and so he is seeking a mother elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, why he... Well, and I think maybe why he doesn't feel as guilty about Jaehaerys' death, because, you know, blood and cheese, he figures it out pretty quick. Blood and cheese were coming for him. And, you know, if he had been home, he certainly he and Kristen Cole could have killed them both. He might have been able to take both out on his own if he was armed.
Yeah.
So, you know, but he doesn't feel badly for his mother, or maybe he does, and he hasn't, you know, he's not big on expressing his feelings, but yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
That these dynamics have changed. These 2 men who had been her vessels for taking action have now distanced themselves from her. Aemond because he feels betrayed, and Kristen Cole because he no longer needs her. Kristen Cole is a user.
Yeah.
He did this to Rhaenyra too, that he was all like, oh, you're such a wonderful princess, and you promoted me to the highest station a Cole has ever known. And then is like, I sullied my good name, give up your family and sell oranges with me and live in poverty. And she's like, no. And he's like, boo, you whore. Like,
yeah, which is so hypocritical, because, like, yeah, like, what's happening with Alicent and Cole now is what Cole left Rhaenyra for.
Yeah. And, yeah, like, there's nothing else you can do for me. So now that I have dirtied you, now you are a whore, and I don't care about you anymore. There are men like this. It's called a Madonna whore complex. Oh, it's fitting. It's fitting that he is one of our Catholic analog characters. Love that.
Man.
Oh, literature. So
I'm still working through my degree. I'll be as literate as you in just a few years.
Oh yeah, and it's a lifelong journey. Like, honestly, some of this took time to set in. I'm old. I'm like 30. You know, so it's been quite a while since I was an undergrad. And the beauty of the thing is, and especially like a liberal arts degree, is you can, if you want to sound like a nerd and do stuff like this, you can use it anywhere. You will become insufferable to watch television with.
Oh yeah.
It's delightful, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to watch television with other nerds who are like, you know, just as into it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Instead
Yeah.
of the Game of Thrones casuals who complain about who put the Battle of the Bastards as like in their top 10 lists of Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Meanwhile, they're missing the symbolism of forgiveness flowing through the mother. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
it's
Yeah.
so brilliant, and it's so simple in a way. And I love Ryan Condal and Sarah Hess because they're very smart.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Um, are there any more things you would like to touch upon that happened this episode, or do you think we're pretty much done?
I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah. I'm really excited for the next couple of episodes. I'm excited to see what happens with the dragon seeds. And you know, maybe we'll get some hints as to why Hugh and Ulf eventually betray Rhaenyra. Maybe those seeds get planted, maybe they don't this season, but yeah, I'm really intrigued by those characters. We'll see the next couple of episodes. But yeah, I think we're pretty much done. Thank you so much, Meera, for coming onto this show. It's been a lovely time chatting with you. Where can people find you?
They can
On the
find me
internet.
here on YouTube at
Yeah.
Meera Reads. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook, Meera Reads. And do you link the Interesting Nerd Discord server?
I don't, but
if you
maybe
want
I
to,
should.
you're allowed to do it.
Yeah, Tom has given me permission. Maybe I'll link it in the episode 8 description or whatever. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I'll definitely link your stuff. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate you having me on. This was a lovely discussion, and I love all the points where we were able to come together and compare. This is just really a lot of fun.
Heck yeah! All right. Thank you so much once again for coming on, and see you.
Yep. See ya.
Bye.